Thank you and welcome. Glad to have you with us today. We're really excited about today's session. I'm Jeff Freeman, President and CEO of the Consumer Brands Association, and we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'd also like to thank PwC for their support of the CPG Speak series. Information on upcoming sessions can be found online at consumerbrandsassociation.org/CPG Speaks. Today we're joined by Carolyn Tastad, Group President, North America, Chief Sales Officer, and Executive Sponsor of Gender and Equality with Procter & Gamble. I'm thrilled to have Carolyn with us to discuss two important and timely issues. One is the company's response to the COVID crisis and her projection of what lies ahead. And the second is P&G's commitment to diversity and equality and the steps it's taking to address bias within and beyond their walls. Everyone knows of P&G's leadership in this space, and we're thrilled to have Carolyn with us. We'll save time for questions at the end. Please use the chat feature to submit your questions, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can. Carolyn, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let me start with kind of a crazy question in these times. You've been with P&G your entire career. That doesn't happen a whole lot. And I'm sure you didn't go into it planning to be with P&G your entire career. Tell us a little bit about that history and when you realized, you know what, I'm going to be here for the entirety of my career.
The notion of people staying with P&G for most of their career is actually very common at P&G. But I will tell you, it was never my intention. And I always thought I'd join P&G and stay there for a few years, like many people did, and then I'd go on to do something else. And I guess while I've had a lot of opportunities to leave, I've probably had many more reasons to stay, whether it's the value and the characters of our company, the great portfolio of brands that we get to represent, or the caliber and the heart of the people that I get to work with every day. So I have had a wonderful career, probably atypical by many standards. I started in our IT organization. I've got a computer science degree. And I started in our Canadian organization, and I've had a chance to work across many different disciplines. I've worked across all of our brand portfolio. I've worked in Canada, I've worked in the US, I've worked in Europe. I also spent probably almost a third of my career on our luxury beauty business, which we've since divested. So I've had, probably by many people's standards, I've changed careers maybe 4 or 5 times. I just happened to do it in the same company with the values that I appreciate every day.
Where was your favorite place to be based among those locations?
Oh, man. For many reasons in many different places. We were in California for a while. I wasn't sure my husband was going to leave when we had to go to the next place. Sure. I did say to him at one point, you have to come too, right? So that was a fun place to live. Geneva was a great place. Our kids have grown up to be real global citizens, and they see the world that way. So that was terrific. But we've loved every place. It's all provided great opportunities.
That's great. In all your years at P&G, I have to imagine no year has been as crazy as this one. If there was one as crazy as this one, we need to talk about that. You're a multinational company, so obviously active in China, active in other aspects of the world. When did you know that we had a problem on our hands?
Well, China was obviously our first lead, right? So in the global lead team and understanding what happened in China, we heard that rumblings in January, but in February for sure. And frankly, beginning of February, mid-February, we started getting prepared in North America, expecting it was going to come here. So it was fairly early on, and still, frankly, I'm not sure we were as prepared for everything that happened as we needed to be. We were really running on the fly for those first couple of months.
As was everyone. Talk a little bit about the diversity of the P&G portfolio is such that certain categories are going to be impacted more than others. What did you see across the range of your portfolio?
Well, at the beginning of the crisis, what was really important to us is 3 priorities, and I've heard this from so many different companies. I think everybody ran a lot of that same playbook. So first, provide a safe environment for our people and ensure the safety of our people. Secondly, continue to serve consumers and customers with our portfolio, making that as broadly available as we could. And then the third priority for us, which we'll get to as well in this conversation, is supporting the communities that we live in and supporting the front line. And so those things were established right from day one and frankly became our global priorities in every market that we do business in. And so the first step as we went through the North American business, and I'll speak from that standpoint because it's probably the most relevant for our listeners, is really ensuring that we could keep our portfolio available. And we see our portfolio, to your point, it's very broad. We sell all kinds of things, but we consider all of them essential. All of these are essential products, and we have a portfolio of daily use categories where brand performance drives choice, and that's really what we wanted to make sure we continue to serve to consumers. So the first thing was ensuring that we were working with lawmakers to get our products and categories seen as essential. And I'll say, plug for CBA. I think that you and your team did a great job, not only in helping us, but in helping the industry deliver that message and ensure that we could all protect the essential nature of the categories that we work in for all of the broad consumers that we serve. So that was really important. But then with the elevated demand that we all saw, it was really a matter of learning how to work differently. How do we build new capabilities, new processes, new teams? We all have seen, I'm sure, record production in many different categories. We certainly saw that. We had to figure out how to streamline our portfolio in many cases to get higher throughput. We had to do a lot on fulfillment and supply chain resilience and completely new ways to manage that. And certainly even as our business moved online, we had to figure out how to enable that as well. So a lot of changes in a short period of time. I'm incredibly proud of our team for how they managed that. And we did see, to your point, great variety across our portfolio. We saw the inevitable run on toilet paper and paper towel. But we also saw, we've also seen great movement on other parts of our business that frankly haven't had anything to do with COVID, but have been part of the home becoming the center of people's daily lives. And, the brands that can continue to deliver with that for the consumers with great innovation, great brand building have also continued to do very well.
Your first point that you mentioned was prioritizing taking care of your employees. I remember from our conversations, P&G was able to do something that other companies weren't. You were able to produce some of your own PPE.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Our teams have done a great job, right? And the response that we've had for the communities we serve, there are, many tens of millions of dollars of product in kind and cash that we've donated. We worked with more than 200 agencies that we've worked with for many, many years in crises. So the team has done all of that work, but we've got really creative people in our research and development group, in our supply chain, frankly, in our innovation teams. And so they early on figured out how to make masks. We had purchased mask lines for North America late February because we knew we would be needing them to enable ourselves to continue to operate. So we figured out how to make masks. We had all kinds of different models and makes as we went through that. We figured out how to make face shields. We figured out how to make hand sanitizer and provided that for our own team. And then frankly, as we had more capacity, we actually launched that within about 8 weeks in the May and June time period as well under the Safeguard name. So a lot of great innovation by the team.
To be able to vertically integrate all of that obviously insulates the company and protects you. It was a good way to be able to navigate this. You mentioned one of the surprise categories of COVID was toilet paper. I'm not sure anybody saw this coming for an upper respiratory illness, but talk a little bit about the run on toilet paper. And also, if you could, because we talked about this a lot, some of the capacity issues there. You're not suddenly going to build new toilet paper manufacturing facilities. So how do you navigate this?
Yeah, that was really remarkable, right? As everybody stocked up, and we see this for storms. We see people stock up for water, and then we see them stock up, but they just kept stocking up. And so the amount of product that people had in their garages or their basement was something we hadn't seen before. I think in March, our paper business, our toilet paper and tissue towel business was up. Consumption was up 80%, like 80. In April, that dropped down to about 40%. And even now, we're 6 months in, it's probably still at 10 to 15%, depending on what's going on week by week. Now, if you think about that 80%, the 40% in many of these past 5 months, that's with little to no promotion, because all of us in this category are really working to produce everything we can and meet the baseline needs of our customers and our consumers. So that heightened demand was something we hadn't expected. I'm really proud of our team for everything that they did. There was a significant streamlining of our portfolio to drive a higher throughput, making sure that all of our plants and our distribution centers had all of the safety protocols in place so we could continue to operate 24/7. We haven't had any major downtime, which has been really remarkable. Great leadership on the ground for all of our sites. And then really making sure that we continue to figure out how to elevate what our products mean to consumers, and how to communicate with consumers about the benefits that they have. So that's been an interesting one. I will tell you, today we are still operating in a constrained supply standpoint. So to your point, anybody who understands the paper business, putting in a new paper machine is not a decision any of us take lightly, and it takes some time to get all of that done. So activating every piece of capacity that we have across the network, making sure that we're doing everything we can to, drive a heightened throughput. But again, we're still running constrained to this day. So we're shipping everything we have. We're producing 24/7, and we're still behind the current demand for those products.
Is it fair to say that until we return to office places, hotels, restaurants, that retail demand is probably going to remain up as you see it today?
Well, I think what we've seen is toilet paper is starting to moderate a little bit. Paper towel continues to be a higher demand because people are cleaning more and they're at home more. So I think a lot of that will stay. We actually think a lot of the consumer habits that we're seeing right now are going to stick for some time. The whole notion of a healthy home and personal hygiene and just a higher focus on cleaning is gonna be a little sticky, and we expect that's going to be here for some time.
Probably not the worst thing.
Probably not.
Let's look forward and how we apply the lessons that are learned here. There's a lot of uncertainty. Certainly, it seems like COVID is going to be with us longer than most people probably expected at the outset. What does that uncertainty mean for you as you do your own planning for the rest of this year into 21? Can you plan? How do you plan in this environment?
We spent a lot of time talking about this, right? We spent a lot of time. I was just with my North America team yesterday. And this is all we were talking about. Is I think as we went through the crisis, one of the things that we saw was this elevated demand, and it happened so quickly. And we were trying to work with it on an ad hoc basis. As we've now come through to the fall, the heightened demand is still there for many categories. And then other categories that frankly don't have anything to do with COVID are really continuing to accelerate as we see innovation now coming into the market. In some cases, innovation was delayed because it just wasn't the focus of the time in April, May, June. And as we look at developing that and pushing that out into the market, we're getting great results from that too. So again, across our portfolio, while we're seeing heightened health, hygiene, and cleaning, we're also seeing the opportunity for great brand building, great brand innovation, great brand communication. So our portfolio and our business across the business has been very strong, and it's our job to continue to serve consumers in that way. So how do we help reinforce the great stuff about these new hygiene and cleaning habits? How do we help consumers understand what the other products are that we have and the other innovation that we're bringing to market, and do that the way we've always done with great brand building? And so we're working that totality of that. We see our responsibility, and part of how we create value for customers and for ourselves is growing markets, growing categories, and then growing our brands as well. And that's what we're really focused on. Focus on the consumer, focused on growing categories. We're confident that we have the right strategies for the short term, for the long term, and we're playing, and planning to win.
Good. You mentioned a little bit earlier some of the charitable efforts that P&G has pursued traditionally. Obviously, a company well known for its charitable efforts. At a time of heightened demand, when you can't make enough to go on the store shelves, how do you fight that instinct of, hey, let's cut back on some of the charitable? In fact, you guys have increased some of your charitable. How do you strike that balance?
We did increase the charitable, but we did it in categories where we had the availability to do that. I mean, that was really the pragmatic solution to that. So we've had we've had efforts in this space for a long time, whether it's for fires or floods or earthquakes or hurricanes. All of these things are really important for us to be there for the communities that we serve. And so that's always been part of our play. Going into the crisis, we already had product forward deployed for the next emergency. So from that standpoint, it was available with a lot of the partners that we work with. The question was then refilling the pipe and making sure that we could continue to do that. And every one of our brand teams stepped up. So again, as I said, many tens of millions of dollars in product, in kind, in cash, working with more than 200 partners worldwide to really make sure that we're doing our part to help our communities at this time of need.
One of the things that P&G is best known for is its advertising and using that advertising to push various messages at different times. How did you use that advertising here to combat the health crisis?
Thanks for mentioning that. Advertising is important to us, right? We're the world's largest advertiser, and we have continued to advertise not only for our brands, but for the things that are important to us as we've gone through this. So as we think about our advertising, we think about, we're committed to, let me say it that way, the authentic and accurate portrayal of all people. We want to make sure that we have, that everybody sees themselves in our ads, whether we have accurate and appropriate representation of multicultural people in our ads. How do we make sure everybody shows up? How do we make sure that we show dads playing an equal role at home, whether that's washing dishes or changing diapers or cleaning floors? How do we make sure we show multi-generational families and blended families and same-sex couples and single families? And how do we show women as real women versus stereotype or a touched-up situation? So all of that accurate and authentic portrayal is important to us in advertising. We also know that it's really important for our employees, for our consumers, and broadly for stakeholders, for us to speak out on issues that are important to people. And in this crisis, it was important for us to spend time working with our partners and developing communication and content that really pointed out the disproportionate impact on certain parts of our population. And we did that across many, many different films, all of which are available on YouTube and in digital channels. One of those populations, which I'll focus on because I am the executive sponsor of our gender equality work, was the disproportionate impact on women. In fact, I think we have that. Let's perfect. Let them cue it up.
Great.
This is not new.
This has happened before.
In every downturn
and disaster in history, gender equality has been set back
as women have stepped forward.
Women always bear a heavy cost.
More of the frontline care.
More of the pay cuts.
more of the jobs lost.
More of the responsibilities at home.
Keeping them from going back to paid work.
These times
are not unprecedented,
but they give us another chance for equality.
If we all choose to step forward as equals.
Care equal.
Hire equal.
Pay equal.
Model equal.
Do equal.
Choose equal.
At home.
At work.
Right now.
For an equal future.
That's great. And it's I can tell you're proud of that, right? That is great.
We have done such great work in so many of these areas. There's another film we'll show you later that is similar. So yeah, I am proud of the team. It's really important messaging. It's really important that we continue to be intentional in not letting ourselves go backwards in times of crisis.
Well, so let's transition, because that's a good pivot opportunity to talk about the work that P&G does on diversity, equality, inclusion. Obviously, an outspoken leader in this space, and it's integrated throughout the company, right? We see it in the advertising, we see it in the workforce. I believe you have over 140 nationalities represented in the workforce. Talk a little bit more about how this focus, and it's a legacy focus, right? How it's integrated into the company operations.
Well, I love that you use the word integrated, right? Because it's something that we hold as a core value, right? We believe in the value of diversity. We believe that when we create an inclusive environment for our employees, we have a higher level of engagement We have a higher level of creativity. We have a higher level of innovation. So it's something we believe in really to our core. And then the other piece is that it is really baked in. It's baked into how we do business. It's baked into how we do innovation. It's baked into how we manage our teams and how we lead. And that integration is what makes it live. It's not a bolt-on. It's not something somebody does. It's not something that the D&I practice does. It's not something that HR does. It's something each of us as business leaders own, develop, and enable. And it's something that it's always front and center from that standpoint. You mentioned we have 140 different nationalities within our company, and we have well over 40 nationalities on our broadest global leadership team, which is really tremendous diversity. And a couple of others. We just announced Deborah Lee to our board of directors. She's joined our board of directors in August, and with her joining the board, we are now at 50-50 on our independent directors from a board standpoint. We are at about 40% of our very top executives, called the top 30 C-suite in the company, are women. And then across our management employees, we're at 48%, almost, well on our way to 50-50, which is our intention. Our aspiration is 50-50 at every level and 40% multicultural representation in the U.S. So we say this all the time. We talk about these goals all the time. We talk about our progress all the time. And again, the work that we do to bake it into our brand building, how we develop our plans, and the kind of workplace we create for our employees is part of what keeps it alive and helps us have the impact that we do.
So I have another question for you on that. Before I ask that, let me just encourage the audience. If you have questions, please submit them through that Q&A function, and we will get to those in a few minutes. You must also believe, though, that the work on diversity and inclusion pays off with consumers. Pays off.
Oh, yeah.
Consumers.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure it does. So, a lot of people have said, and we've had these conversations inside our company, outside the company. I've had them externally on panels. People are saying, is it really that important to have that loud a voice? And isn't there risk associated with having that kind of a voice? And honestly, the answer is pretty simple. In today's world, with today's expectations of consumers, whether it be Gen Z, millennials, or baby boomers, people expect companies to take a stand. 9 out of 10 consumers, I think, say that they have a more positive image of a brand or a company if it has taken a stand on something that's important to them. And half of consumers say that their purchase decisions are going to be linked to that. So these things are really important for people. Now, you have to do it in a very authentic and interdependent, integrated way. It can't be something that's on the surface, and when you dig underneath it, it's like, I know you said you stood for that, but obviously you don't. It has to be authentic. It has to be baked in all the way through. And then your voice comes out as clear. It comes out as coherent. It comes out as authentic. And that's when it makes a difference. So CBA has also done some work in this area. And I'm not sure the numbers. I think it's somewhere around 70% of consumers expect companies to take a stand. And I think that's really important for all of us. If you think about Consumer Brands Association, all of us as companies of brand builders, we have a real opportunity to lead in this space. And it is what our consumers expect. It is what our people expect, our employees expect, our broader stakeholders, including shareholders, expect. The other piece that is, I think, obvious, but I'm going to state it more overtly, I talked about the diversity that we have in our company. We have the most diverse leadership in our company's history, and we have the best results in more than a decade. And if you talk to many people within our company, and certainly myself included, those two things are very related. Those two things are connected without a doubt.
Well, and to your point, there are two pieces of data that coincide here. One is the desire to see corporations take a more active role in terms of its positions. I you just have to accept that there is a decrease in confidence in Washington that has been trending for some time. And I think people are looking to companies to be a leader, number one. Number two, corporate America has actually increased the amount of trust it has earned throughout the COVID crisis, particularly the consumer packaged goods industry. Yes. We are way up in terms of the number of consumers who have found that they've increased their trust in the industry. So people are asking us to take a stand. We have the credibility to do it today. I think those two things work hand in hand. And Go ahead.
You know, the other thing that links to that is, to your point, there is higher trust in CEOs. There is higher trust in business. And then with that comes an expectation. The other thing that we don't say often enough is there's no need to wait for permission. There's no need to wait for regulation, for a new legislation. What are we waiting for? You know, so as leaders of our own companies, as people who consumers are looking to, where they have expectations of what we stand out and deliver, and where they trust us to do that, and they trust us to have a voice and move agendas forward. We don't have to wait for anybody to do that. We don't have to wait for anybody to tell us it's okay to go. And so the opportunity for everyone that we have that's listening, everybody within the CBA Association, certainly we talk about this all the time, is act, do something, take a stand, and move these agendas and these issues forward, because we can, and we can have a really significant positive impact in doing so.
Well, as we discussed, P&G has a long history of that. I go back to, it's not that old, but I go back to the women's national soccer team and the very pointed statement that P&G took on equal pay for the women's team, the men's team, and certainly got out there on a limb, and a leadership limb on that one. And it's issues like that that probably position the company, and this is where I want to transition, probably position the company to be more nimble when critical moments occur. And we had one of those, obviously, in June when George Floyd was murdered. David Taylor, your chairman and CEO, came out quite quickly with a statement. It didn't seem, I'm guessing there weren't a lot of committee meetings. There wasn't a lot of parsing of all the words. I'm guessing that P&G was pretty well prepared to come out and make a statement in a way that others in corporate America may not have been. Talk about that moment, that situation.
Yeah, and that one was just a very organic reaching out, knowing that our people were hurting, right? So David's note that went out to the organization was filled with his sadness and frustration at what was happening in the communities that we're living in, knowing that our employees needed to hear again what we believe as a company and what we aspire for every one of our employees. And David sent notes out. Many of us did. Many people sent notes to their team, frankly, reached out to individuals, collectively, individually. My North America team came together, and often we spend a lot of time in action. What are we going to do? How are we going to manage this? We actually, for my North America team, we had a probably 90-minute to 2-hour call, just letting people feel. Just letting people sit in their personal reflection of what was happening. And it was really organic. It was really authentic. It was very powerful. But coming out of that, even that lead team, made up of every one of the category leaders and our customer team leaders, all of our business leaders for North America, came up with an action plan to really drive racial equality and do what we can through our employees, through our communities, through our partners, through our brand teams, to really make progress. And the depth of the commitment and the personal commitments that were made by having those kind of dialogues and reflection were really important. But everything from, again, what are our brands going to do, to working with many of our customers and other partners and communities on community projects, we announced a full paid one paid day of civic engagement for every one of our employees, to say, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're not going to mandate a holiday. We did announce it on Juneteenth, but we said, you do what's right for you relative to civic engagement and what's important for you. What is it important for you to make calls to your representatives? Is it important for you to march? Is it important for you to write letters? Is it important for you to volunteer? What does that look like? And we want to make sure you understand our support for it. So a pretty broad action plan that we put together, and one that will go on for a long time.
That's impressive. And I know what you mean in terms of the internal discussions that you had right away. We did some of those internally as well, a staff town hall that led to most people on the virtual town hall being in tears, just as people shared their life experiences with one another. So that can be extremely powerful. Internal is one aspect of this, right? How you get your your team aligned. And then there's the external, using the might of P&G. You guys have done that with several external facing pieces, various videos. Talk to me a little bit about that, how there is the internal component, but how you manage that and use the power of the company externally.
Well, and part of that is, again, speaking out and ensuring that people understand where we stand. And so we have a couple of films that we had done in this space. We did, a number of years ago, we did The Talk, and a few years ago, we did The Look. Both of these are films about Black Americans and really the experiences that they have faced for decades, and really driving awareness of that and making sure everybody understood what that meant. Because awareness drives empathy, empathy can drive action, and that's what we were looking to accomplish. And as we went through, as all of this social, the need for social justice and the heightened awareness of the racial inequality that we're dealing with today, as all of that came to light, we reissued those films. And then we also created another one called The Choice, which we also have here for everybody to view, if you want to do that.
Thank you.
With inverted tongue, from whence does fulfillment come? And I expel from this mortal shell, where I die for living.
You know, I hope it's obvious from the film, because a lot of people don't expect that when we're talking about the Black community, but that whole film was set up and targeted to the silent majority, to white people, saying, we need you to act, right? We need you to plan, donate, march, speak up, but we need you to step forward and step out in support of our Black brothers and sisters, and making sure that we understand what they need, and we need to support them at this time. So that's really what that was targeted for. And then we set up a fund where people can add to that fund, where our brands are adding to that fund, just to ensure that we provided flexibility and funding for legal aid, for other NGOs to really drive other action that's really deeply needed and support at this time.
That piece is moving, and I have a question that came in that I think is related to that. How do you discuss privilege in a non-threatening way to ensure the kind of the discussion you want to have with senior leadership within the company? I mean, that has been, we've all seen it, right? And it's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. Seeing that in the video, it really touches home. You got to understand the privilege you have and go one step further. How do you discuss that internally?
We discuss privilege really openly, and it's, but we have done it in a way to really drive awareness. I will give, props to MARC, which is Men Advocating Real Change, a program that Catalyst had put in place, and we've adopted it globally. Put so many people through it, because it actually gets at power and privilege, and it gets at really honest dialogue, but in a very inclusive way. It really helps build awareness. Awareness builds understanding, understanding builds empathy, empathy builds action and change. And so all of those things have been really important. But we talk about privilege very openly. We talk about, and some people, I've had this conversation, here's a fun plug. We've been working with another outside partner doing some podcasts from a gender equality standpoint. We launched The first one today. So I'm podcasting in my spare time, Jeff. There's a strange one for you. But we did one with Abby Wambach today, talking about pay equality and all the other things that have been going on. We also had a great conversation with Justin Baldoni, who many people may know from Jane the Virgin, but who has done a lot of work on masculinity, and he's got a whole podcast called Man Enough. And we had a huge conversation about privilege and how do you think about that. And it's not that privilege is bad. Privilege just has to be understood, and privilege has to be shared and lended, and it has to be recognized. And when you can get to that, the world becomes a more inclusive place.
You mentioned Abby Wambach. It reminds me of a quick story that her wife put out a piece that when they drive home from their kid's soccer game, Abby, obviously one of the greatest soccer players of all time, probably has many opinions, and she doesn't share a single one of them with her kids. She keeps her thoughts to herself. And the point was, if she can keep her mouth shut, you can keep your mouth shut as a parent when your kids are playing soccer.
They are a dynamic couple. Glennon just has written a new book, Glennon Doyle, and I think it's been more than 26 weeks on the New York bestseller list. And they're a fun. We work with both of them, and they're fun people to work with.
Let's transition as we kind of come towards the close. How P&G can be a leader for the industry, move the industry along on some of these issues. It's not always easy, and there are, as you well know, there are companies that would rather take a lower profile here. How do you navigate this with some of your peers? And what advice do you have for companies in terms of their thinking in this space?
A couple of things. One, from a business strategy standpoint, it's got to be baked in. It's got to be baked in a way that makes sense for the business. We've had a lot of conversations with our brand teams to say what cause is important to you, what issue is important to you, and does it make sense, and does it fit with who your brand is? If it fits with the brand character, if you can make it fit in a way that makes sense and that everything can build in that, then it lives, as I said before. And so that notion of, we're really intentional about that, and that takes some time. It doesn't happen automatically. It's like, oh wow, I really want to work on this issue. We spend a lot of time vetting that. We spend a lot of time ensuring that our strategy is robust, right? What is the brand voice going to be? How do we put our money where our mouth is? What are the other things that we're going to link to that? How do we make sure that we have credibility to speak out on that issue? Do we really understand it in a very nuanced way? Because a lot of these things are nuanced. Because you don't want to take a misstep in these things, and we want to make sure that we're actually advancing a cause and truly having a positive impact, not just doing it because it's the popular thing to do. That's not our intention at all. Our intention is impact. So that's really important from a brand standpoint. Then internally, from a company standpoint, I'd say there's two things, and they're linked to both of them: intentionality and accountability. You have to be intentional in the effort that you put in place. You have to be committed. You have to be intentional. You have to make sure that you are watching everything that you're as part of your business strategy. And then you have to drive a high level of accountability. It can't be words. It can't be delegated. It has to be owned by the executive team, by the CEO, and it has to get all the way through the organization. And we're very intentional about that. When I talk about our targets, when we talk about our goals, when we talk about our strategies, we talk about these very openly and very frequently. It's very transparent to our people where we're making progress, where we're not. And we don't hide behind that, because then we're not being true and authentic to what our aspiration is.
Along those lines, the authenticity, the intentionality of it. Let me go back to a question that we've received in terms of kind of unpacking the real focus on Black leaders within the company, more aggressive about your own diversity goals. Can you share a little bit more about that issue specifically?
Yeah, we set targets. We have set targets for a number of years now. We set targets. This might sound different for people. We set targets for women and men. You have to look at the total population in order, otherwise you can look at a small population and you may not make the progress that you need to. You got to deal with the denominator in any way you go through this. So we look at targets for women and men. We look at targets for U.S. minorities, and then we're very we plan. We don't set the targets randomly. Hang on, my screen just went off. I knew that would happen.
You can still see.
I need to see your face. And so we set the targets, we track the targets, we talk about the work, but importantly, we do as much from a behavioral and cultural standpoint to make sure that our people understand what's expected, what our expectations are for leaders, what our expectations are for the culture that we want to have, for the behavior we want to see across our organization. So we do all of those things.
Well, so let's close with this then. You're setting targets, you're stretching yourself. How would you stretch the industry? What challenge would you give to the industry in terms of what it can do in this space, given the power that the consumer packaged goods industry has?
I'm going to go to two places. This might be a long answer because one thing you and I didn't talk about is the disproportionate impact that right now the crisis is having on women. Okay. And so right now there is, we as an industry have made some progress. I will say nowhere near enough. And we just have to look around the CBA boardroom to see the lack of progress that we've made as an industry. Or take a look at our own boardrooms or our own leadership teams. And so there's so much more to do as an industry. And the challenging part right now with the crisis is that we are seeing this disproportionate impact on women, right? Women's unemployment has risen over 14%. I think male unemployment is still under 12. 60% of the jobs lost as we went through this belong to women because of the disproportionate number of women in service industries that were disproportionately hit. So we have to recognize that that's the reality that we're dealing with. The second thing, which has really faced us, actually Sheryl Sandberg wrote a great article, a great blog on this, and she really talked about the double shift. So Sheryl has historically talked about the double shift where women may be working full time and then they come home and have a disproportionate share of responsibility for home and family. That's the double shift. Bring on COVID, women are now working the double shift. So they're still doing their day jobs, they're still taking on a lot of home and family, and now they're disproportionately doing the schooling or taking care of family and elderly relatives. So we have to stop this double shift. And one of the things that we have said so much in our company is we need to really make room for men and women to play an equal role at home. And during this crisis, we've seen so many beautiful examples, great examples of men stepping up, playing an equal part with two spouses that are working, making sure that they're taking turns on the schooling, on the housework, figuring out how to make it all work. And what we have to do is continue that, right? How do we, as companies, as CEOs, ensure that we have policies that continue to make put flexibility front and center? At P&G, we talk about an abundance of flexibility. That's the mindset we want to have, an abundance of flexibility. Because we've learned during this crisis that everybody from new hires to CEOs can progress work, can work effectively in a virtual environment. We've all embraced new collaboration tools like we're doing today. We've all seen our ability to move our business forward. We can't unlearn that. We can't unlearn that and revert back to the old behaviors. So the starting point, I'd say, is recognize that this could have a disproportionate impact and make sure it doesn't. We need to make sure that we don't lose a pipeline of talented, diverse leaders that we've built in this organization because we weren't intentional enough at making sure that they have what they need to stay. So that's an important element. And again, more women are talking about leaving work than men are talking about it. We found that in our own surveys at P&G. I think we found it fairly broadly in the industry. So be intentional, don't lose the pipeline, and don't go backwards in what flexibility means for men and women. It's something that is wonderful for Gen Z, for new employees. They live that way, so it's really an important thing to keep. And then I think the second thing I'd say is where I started before. As CEOs, as leaders of our business, we don't have to wait for anything. We don't have to wait for permission. We don't have to wait for jurisdiction. We don't have to wait for regulation. We can act. All of that is in our power. We can address pay equality. We can address representation. We can address culture, and we can take on issues that are important to consumers that we serve and our entire employee base, our stakeholder base. So I would say act.
I appreciate that. All of it is good feedback. It's coming from what is perhaps arguably the preeminent consumer packaged goods company that is proving that this can be done, that we can strike this balance with diversity, equality, with business. It's good business. So I appreciate that. And thank you so much for giving us the time today. I'd like to thank PwC again for their support of this series. We're really grateful for that. And I'd just like to take a moment to highlight a couple upcoming sessions that we have. One on September 17th, we'll be joined by Jessica Alba and Nick Vallejos on building direct consumer relationships. They're representing the Honest Company. They've done a great job. Grounding leadership in purpose with Bay Perez from Coca-Cola on September 23rd. We encourage you to register and view other upcoming sessions at consumerbrandsassociation.org/CPG Speaks. We welcome your feedback on today's session. Please feel free to put it here in the Q&A. We'll be able to see that afterwards. You can also submit comments to education@consumerbrandsassociation.org. Carolyn, once again, thank you. Thank you to all those who attended. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.